Good evening, everyone, and please let us know if you can hear us loud and clear on the microphones, because we've had a few audio issues tonight. Now, tonight, as you know, we're talking to Josh Turner, Paranormal Roundtable. I feel quite honoured, in fact, because Josh doesn't do interviews for anyone else. So I hope our audio and our tech equipment hold up. Josh, welcome to Truth Proof Livestream.
How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you, and great to be sat across table talking to you. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Josh. Josh Turner, the man, what you're about, before we get into some of these amazing accounts that you're going to talk about tonight.
I don't know. I mean, what do you want to know? Because I guess me and you've talked a lot off air, off camera, and I guess, you know, like I've told you before, I've always considered myself, you know, and it just sounds kind of, you know, to the audience, but I've always been a fighter. That's kind of, we talked about that, you know.
Yeah.
I do coach a little bit, and I train a lot, and I actually made a video earlier announcing the show training while I was training. So that's kind of what I've always considered myself. But now, as I've gotten older, I'm not a pugilist anymore. I'm like, you know what? I need to start not getting hit in the head so I can remember these encounters, because we talked about that too, stopping and fighting when you're at a certain age. So now I just coach my nephews and other people, and I try to stay fit so I can keep alive and keep telling these stories until my old age.
Well, so that's great. It's good. Well, I know you train most days, and you got to find out, because I never tell people about the fact that I do a little bit of training as well, or I have done over years.
You do.
So
I was impressed. I mean, the video you showed me, you were like, hey, because you saw me doing the 660 pounds on the flies, and you were like, check this out. And you were doing you were moving some weight. I talked about it on my show. And folks, we're going to release the recording that me and Paul did. That's going to come up not this Friday, but next Friday. And it's going to be I think it's going to be a two-parter. And what we talked about was pretty interesting. And we're thinking about calling it Dogman Origins. Me and Paul talked about it because we go back to the origins of where these things come from and what these things are. And I really enjoyed our conversation. I enjoyed our set that we did together. And I think I'm looking forward to doing it again so we can complete it, because we did not finish. We're 2 hours in and we just kind of scratched the surface. I don't normally do shows like you said, but this is October, and so my people kind of got, they came to me and they said, look, you're getting a lot of offers to do shows, and so you need to do some shows, not just your show, because I don't want to come out of my comfort zone, but I am, and I'm doing them with people that I'm friends with, like you. I'm set to do Jason Bland, Tony Merkel. Only people that I'm comfortable with, that I'm friendly with. People that I don't know, I've never really dealt with, I just turned them down. No offense to them. I don't do a lot of interviews because, but doing this live with you, I feel comfortable. Is not a problem, and I've worked with you before. So,
well, like you said, Josh, we did that 2 hours, and we've probably got another at least 4 hours, I would think.
4 hours out, yeah.
Things, and then you've sort of set the template where we're going to go with it, and we'll start early or.
Sure. Well, there's a lot of meat on the bones, put it that way.
Yeah. So tonight then, Josh, I mean, obviously you're well known, we'll call it, within the cryptid community, but for our UK people who don't know you speak regularly on your own podcast, Paranormal Roundtable. Do you want to tell us about the other podcasts that you...
You're talking about my podcast?
Yeah. What other ones do you do?
Well, I helped out Ryan Tremblay on A Whisper to a Scream, and we've done some shows. We did the one about Gugwe, Genosqua, and Goatman origins, and we're getting to do another set called Wendigo, right. And that's going to be coming out. That's pretty interesting. I worked with another one with Jason Bland, but I'm trying to figure out when to put that in, probably in early November, because it was a 3-hour set. I just finished up with Barton Nunley. Barton also has agreed to, he's going to do the Halloween special with me. So that's going to be interesting, just for him to be kind of the co-host and going to tell him the stories that I got and get, his feedback on it. I do have some pretty terrifying encounters that I've collected for Halloween, because what we decided after the last 2 Halloween shows, we were like, you know what, why don't we just the entire year let's pick out the really the scariest ones from each category, and we're just going to throw them out there for Halloween. It'll be a 2 or 3 hour show, and I'm looking forward to that. And then of course your set that's going to come out. I really thought that needed to be done in October because it was your wheelhouse. I know you do a lot of paranormal, just everything, but your wheelhouse and my wheelhouse, we're known for our Dogman research.
Well, moving on from that then, if you want to tell us about your encounter and the reason why you're so entrenched now in this genre, in this subject. So
sure.
The Texas werewolf.
Yeah, the Texas Wolfman is what we started calling it because I started a cryptid action figure line, and I don't know if you know about that. I think we've talked about it. And so I started off with a few people from Texas, Nick Redfern, Ken Gerhard, Lyle Blackburn, and then we had Barton Nunley, who's from Kentucky, then me, Linda Godfrey. And so we had a guy who said, I can sculpt what you saw when you were 15 years old. And I thought, and as you would say in the UK, bollocks, and I thought, there's no way. And as you say, this guy's a wanker. I don't believe it because I've had people try and to draw what I wrote, or what I saw, and they're trying to write it out, whatever, and it doesn't work. It doesn't compute. Like I look at it and I'm like, that's not what I saw. So it's never nobody's ever come close enough to be to what me and my friend and his family saw that night. But this guy said he could sculpt it. So we went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. His name is Charlie Perez. And then he brought me the statue, and I'll actually show it right now. If you want, Anthony, can you bring me what I saw? And I'm not kidding, minus the ears. The ears were a little bit taller, a little bit straighter. This is literally what I saw. So this guy sculpted it. And so because I'm from Texas, and each one of the researchers and authors had their own wheelhouse, Lyle Blackburn is known for the Falk Monster. Linda Godfrey is the Beast of Bray Road. And, of course, you have Michigan Dogman. We started calling this thing the Texas Wolfman. And this right here, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not joking. This guy, Charlie Perez, did this. And his little mouth opens up right here. And
Can they hear me, your tech guy? I can't hear Les. I can see him gesturing, but
yeah,
Les. We can see Les. That's it. Oh man, we see you, Les, but nobody else.
Yeah, no, you've got sound.
There it is. Can you hear me now?
We've got sound, have we? Okay.
Yeah, we'll just keep it like that. And sorry about that, folks. So let me start from the beginning. And yeah, so this is just so everybody can see it. Make sure you're showing it on my left side. My guy said to show you.
Yep.
This is the sculpt of what I saw when I was 15 years old. It's like I said, it's uncanny. I can't believe, other than the ears are just a little bit different, but that's what I remember. That's how I remember seeing it. And I just can't, words can't describe when he brought that to my friend's restaurant. We met at my buddy's restaurant, and it was just like, he presented that to me, and I had seen pictures, but I wasn't for sure about what I was going to be looking at. And when I looked at it, it really took my breath away.
Did it give you
because I've
shivers?
had a sketch artist not even get it right, and I thought this is crazy. So we started calling it the Texas Wolfman. Charlie Perez did that, and we didn't know what to call it. We have done shows, and I believe we did one that was called Texas Wolfman, and and it talks about some of the encounters and sightings here in Texas. There have been quite a few, just like where you're from in England, and so actually, me and you, Paul, we did a set together about 2 years ago, and then it
Right,
never
yeah,
got released because we didn't finish,
yeah.
and unfortunately, my co-host, the late Armando Salazar, did that show with me. He passed away sadly 3 weeks ago from COVID.
I'm sorry to hear that.
I almost released that just in to commemorate him, but then I thought it's incomplete. And one of the things that Armando always lamented was that we never finished with you, and he had a lot of respect for you. He really liked you, and he was always like, "We got to finish with Paul Sinclair. We really need to finish with Paul Sinclair." We never did. And now 2 years later, we finally, like I said, we already did the 2 hours. We're gonna call it, Dogman Origins, and then we're gonna go from there because we still got a lot to talk about.
Yeah,
But today, right now, what I'm going to tell you is, when I was 15 years old in 1990, I was out. Kind of embarrassed. I was out being a juvenile delinquent because I did a little time as a kid. I was kind of in and out of facilities. Didn't have a lot of respect for the law. Well, my mother is Mexican, Hispanic of descent, and my dad is Caucasian. But I grew up with two different cultures, and on my Hispanic side, there were legends and stories. They called it the cadejo, or the hombre lobo. The hombre lobo is what this thing is, this creature here. That's pretty much what that is. And the cadejo is the black dog. Now, we discussed that too, Paul, the black dog. Now, I figured out they're two different things. And I've had to run in with both of them, and I can tell you this: I'm almost positive they're two different things, and I've seen them both. When I was 15, the other one when I was 17, and I was with a carload of my friends, and one of them was a guy I used to box with, and he came on the show, and we talked about it. The thing is, when I was 15 years old, I didn't believe any of this crap. I had lived in a house that had some hauntings going on. But I was actually on the phone last night with my friend Barton, and we were talking about it. And I said, we were talking about, he lived in a house that was haunted, and we were talking about our experiences, and we were comparing it. And I said, it didn't really bother me that, but Matt, I felt like there was something there, like aggravating the females. Whatever was there was like really bothering, like my mother, my aunt, my sisters, things like that. It was like kind of left me alone, but yeah. I did get glimpses of stuff, and I would see like my toys be moved around, stuff like that. But other than that, I had no real, there wasn't a whole lot of like, oh, I'm terrified, So when they would talk about the La Chusa and La Llorona and the Chupacabra, I know it's mentiras, man. It's all just, like stories, lies you tell the kids, behave, or the Diablito's going to get you out the window. I never believed none of that stuff. And when I was 15 years old, I went out with a buddy of mine, and we were egging cop cars. It's just Taylor in my hometown has a tradition of that. So we would go to Davis Street, and we would hide. We'd just go from house to house throwing eggs at cops. The cops would get out and run after us, and then we would run away. We did it every year. I started doing it when I was like 12. Yeah. And I did it until I was like 17. It was just what we did. And the cops knew who we were. They would go and tell our parents and blah, blah, blah. But it was just like, okay. And they couldn't prove anything because we'd wear like balaclavas and hoods and stuff. And so we came back from having a good time harassing the police. Nobody got busted that night. We were all laughing it up. And so 5 of us, and we all went our separate ways. And then it was me and my friend, and we finally got back to his house. His name is Daniel. And his mother said, your mother called. Okay. Now, Mexican moms don't play around. There's none of this, oh, okay, I'll come get you. No. She said, you tell that pendejo to get home, and said it with some choice words. And she said, your mom's very mad. And so you need to get home. And I was like, God. So I was like, 30 minutes past my curfew. I knew I was going to be grounded. I was going to be in trouble. So we just kind of, goofed around because I knew I was going to be in trouble anyway. So we walked down to the convenience store, and, we got those really big drinks, those big, like way too much soda than your kidneys should be handling. But anyways, we're walking up the street, and I'm complaining to my friend. I'm like, I specifically remember this, like looking down at the street, not even looking ahead and going, God, my mom's so mean and blah, blah, blah. I hate my mom, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, yeah, I know, man. blah, 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 So I'm complaining to him, and then he puts his hand up, and I'm like, I look up, and I'm like, what the heck am I looking at? And we see what, to me, at first looked like a German Shepherd. Like, I thought it was a dog. I thought it was sitting in a ditch in front of my friend John's house, because it was right there in front of his house, and I was just like, what is that? And so I thought it was one of the neighbors' dogs that had gotten loose, and one of the neighbors had a German Shepherd. And so we started trying to call it at first. We're like, hey, come here. And then it was about a block away. And when it heard us, it kind of turned its head a couple times like that. And, when it did, it looked right at us. And then I was like, okay, that's not a dog. And it's black or grayish black, whatever. I was like, it's not a coyote for sure. And I was like, that's a wolf. And so my friend said, there are no wolves. And, this is he lives in town. Okay. This is not, in the country. And I said, I don't know what that is. And so we just kept staring at it. But we kept kind of slowly walking toward it. And so my friend, you know how you usually go to pick up a rock or something, to make the dog scared. I think we both kind of leaned forward, and then it just stood up. And I was like, okay, that thing just stood up on two legs. This is not a dog. This is not a wolf. I don't know what this is. And it ran across the road on two legs. When it did that, I don't remember, time just kind of like slowed down. And I just remember looking down at the ground, and my cup of soda was on the ground. There was ice. Bottom of my pant leg was like wet. I remember that. And I just remember my shirt being like ripped. And I remember turning and looking, and my friend was already like almost to his house. There was a house on the corner that had a big giant fence around it. And it was tall. They had an 8-foot fence. I know it sounds weird, but the reason they did was because they had a bunch of pit bulls, and the city was trying to make them, I guess, from what I remember, like it's been 30 years ago, comply or something. And they were trying to force them to stop because those pit bulls would get loose and stuff. So they had been evicted, and then there was just this fence that was starting to kind of fall down. And my friend's house was right next door to that. So it wasn't far away, so he started to run. Well, for years, he's always apologized to me about running and leaving me, but I told him, I said, dude, if I wouldn't, he was telling me to go, and I don't remember him telling me. And he said, you wouldn't move, so you just stood there frozen, so I tried to yank you. Back then, I was poor, I grew up, I didn't have a lot of money, so it was one of my favorite shirts, and he tore it, And so I had probably 4 or 5 good shirts, and that was one of them, and I was like, that's great, or at least, shirts, And so I was like, dude, you just tore my freaking, my shirt, And so that was kind of my aggravation with him. We talked about it. I said, I don't mind you leaving, because I would have left too if I would have had, the wherewithal and not just stood there frozen. So I started to walk slowly back toward his house. Of course, I had to walk in front of the neighbor's house with the big fence. This thing came in between our two houses. And I saw it just walking, and the upper, like you can see the musculature of this, the legs were probably a little more muscular than this, and then the lower legs probably a little thinner, from what I remember. But this is very close to the likeness of it right here, this thing. And so...
Well, Josh, did it have glowing eyes? Were its eyes glowing?
No, I don't remember the eyes being like anything specific. I think it had yellow eyes, but I don't remember like something just... like, oh, I remember them piercing my soul, nothing like that. It wasn't anything specific. And I don't remember the tail like in any real detail, because it was walking forward like this. My friend said it had a tail. I can't even, because sometimes when things like that happen, you don't remember every last detail.
No.
I really, when someone gives me a story and it's real detailed, and they're like, and then there was this like little pink ribbon on the side, and I remember this, and I remember that, and you're going like, really? Because that's kind of, I go from my own experience of, not recalling like every last detail. You know what I mean? Because there's so much adrenaline going, and your heart's going like this. You're not going like, okay, oh, look, its hands are manicured. I can see the claws. That's nice. Okay, oh, and it's got, you're not thinking like that. You're just thinking survival. I'm going to die. There's a werewolf. It's going to eat me. That's what you're thinking. And I didn't have a cell phone back then because they didn't exist. But if I did, I wasn't going to be pulling it out and going, here you go, can you pose for me? Because people have said things really ridiculous like that. Well, you take a picture. Well, first of all, it was 1990, and we were real people back then. We didn't need an electric leash to, everywhere you went, and we survived amazingly. But I wouldn't have taken a picture anyway. I mean,
Now,
there were some guys I talked to at a Lake Texoma, and they were like, "Why didn't they take a picture?" They were trying to get away and not be eaten. They weren't taking out their phones and clip, hey, let's take a picture of this thing. So it's kind of a ridiculous notion to say, unless you're far away and this thing is behind a cage, you're not going to really be snapping photos of it. And so, anyways, this thing came down. There was kind of like an alley between the two houses, or like a walkway, and it went right up to the fence. Now, it was physical in the sense that it manipulated that fence, like it was judging it and manipulating it. People have asked me, they'll say, well, they can jump. Yes, they can. I interviewed a police officer out here at the Colorado River, and he had one near the water treatment plant, and it did jump over a fence about that tall, according to him. And he lost his service revolver in the incident. He says he retired after that, and then he went to live in Arizona. I don't know the whole story. I talked to his friend who said that he got reprimanded for losing his service revolver, but I can imagine he was so flustered by what was going on that that's probably how it happened. Well, I remember my friend's dad being very brave and actually coming out onto the porch and then telling me in Spanish to come on. And I looked right at him and I focused on him, and I had to literally walk past this thing, which was several feet away. And I kind of glanced at it a couple times. I heard the fence shake. One of the things I remember is this weird looking foot, these weird looking feet that these things have, kind of going onto the fence, you know what I mean? And I remember looking and seeing that. And then I tried not to stare at it, and I heard like the noise or whatever, and I just kind of blocked it out. My friend's family, they saw it in the window as it walked by. And years later, 29 years actually later, in 2 months, my friend's brother said that there was like a black vapor that came off of its back. I didn't see that. No. And actually, I didn't even really want to look at it because I'll be real honest, folks. I think I might have already been like hyperventilating and maybe even crying at that point. I don't remember. It was very traumatic. But my friend's dad even walked out to the yard to meet me halfway, and I ran to him, and then we ran inside the house. And of course, he had his gun out, a nice shotgun ready to try to defend us if we had to. But it didn't come into the house. We looked out the window, and it wasn't by the fence anymore, and we didn't know exactly where it went. One of the people inside the house said that they saw it run real fast by the window again and go around the back of the other house. But here's the thing, that house right there was a house that was behind it. And there was a really weird guy that used to live there, and everybody would make jokes that he was, a vampire because you'd only see him at night. And his house, he was like a hoarder, he hoarded a bunch of stuff. And so people would say, hey man, that guy's really weird, and then all of a sudden he just disappeared, and nobody, like, I guess people who, I don't know if he owned the house or whatever, but people came and they moved all of his stuff out, and he wasn't seen again. So I always kind of wondered if it was him. I know that sounds weird. That's it. That's connotating, it's like it's a werewolf, and that he was the werewolf. But I don't know. I just, as a kid, when we were younger, we would talk about it. We would be like, that guy, maybe he was a werewolf. Maybe it was him, because the way that it would have had to have gone. And I've never really talked about this issue. This is the first time I've ever really talked about this on the air with anybody. I've talked about it in private, but yeah, it would have had to have like gone by that guy's yard or been in that guy's on that guy's property. It wasn't a straight shot, so it would have had to have gone through that property. So how it got there so quickly, it would have either, there must have been some sort of metaphysical aspect to it. That's what I think, because there was like, that guy's house was right there. So, I mean, it was just weird. I to this day, I still don't know how it got through there so quickly. There was a bunch of junk right there, or it knew where to go, like it maneuvered. So like the person that, so I don't know. We've postulated on many theories of what this thing was, what it could be. My tia, who died years ago, she always claimed that the hombre lobo was a real thing. She was always like, mijo, the hombre lobo. And I was tired of hearing about it. And I was like, have you ever seen this thing? And she was like, no. I was like, then it doesn't exist. Stop talking about this thing. And she says, there's a lot of people who claim blah, blah, blah. Well, after I saw it, a lot of people actually did come forward to me, people I went to school with even, that I played Little League with, but their parents had told them not to talk about it. Now, in Mexican culture, there's this thing where if you talk about something, you know, you invite like the curse on you, like a patrica comes and then it's, you know, it'll come for you, you know. So my mother, I don't think she ever really saw one of these things, but she did believe in it, and I believe that she heard it, and she believed that that they were almost like a bad omen. Um, Believe it or not, my uncle's name was Paul, and that's my middle name too, actually. And your name is Paul. That's pretty cool. And one of my best friends' name is Paul. He was a Navy SEAL, and we were talking about my uncle Paul. He died long before I was born. He was murdered. He was murdered and then thrown in my mother's. It was very traumatic for her. He was only 18, and he was murdered and then thrown in the yard of my mom's family. And the night that he died, my mother said that she heard the most ungodly howls, you know, for hours, and it woke her up. And they all went outside, and that's when they found his body.
Right.
And the killers were never found. Nobody knows what happened. A little side note to that: years later, my godson's mother, who's actually a Vietnamese, she had a woman that was a shaman. It was a Buddhist shaman, and she put me on the phone with her, and she said that there was a male presence that would follow me, and she said, "You have an uncle named Paul." I had never told this my friend's mother, who was married to one of my best friends. I had never told, you know, these people anything about that guy or my uncle. You know, they didn't know his name. This guy was not known to them at all. They had no idea who he was. For someone in Vietnam to be able to tell you that and say that was very weird. So that's just a weird sidelight to that. But my mom's family had talked about these things, you know, and then they had stories of the Cadejo. Now, the older generation, my great aunt, I guess, they called her Wela, my great grandmother's full-blooded Comanche. Well, her brother, they worked chopping cotton, and it was just something that they did. Then the next generation, they did it too. And then my tia Hova, the one that was always talking about these things, she became a seamstress. So half of them would sew, and the other half were working in the cotton fields. Cotton, our hometown's known for cotton and shipping it, and there's a railroad interchange there. And so one of the things that came up was that there was a legend of this black dog called the Cadejo. And so there was a big debate about what people were seeing. The white people in my hometown, the Caucasian descended people, were just, predominantly German or Czech. There were only a few Anglo families there. There was mostly Czech and German, and there's even an entire community of Czech and called Granger, and there's stories there too that I've gotten. But they believe that it was a werewolf that came over from the old country. Like the old timers. I'm not talking about people my generation or maybe even your generation, but like the older generation. They believe that it was like somebody who had come over from the old country, and they were hidden, and there was a group of them, you know, and they were werewolves. And my friend, whose mother was raised by his grandmother, she was African American. She called it the haint. Now, when we were kids, we'd go out there and play, and she'd say, "Stay out of that bottomland." And I was like, "What is it with this bottomland? What is your Granny Bass always asking about this? Y'all stay down there in them bottomland, you're gonna be food for them wolves." She would tell me just like that, and I would be like, "What in the heck is this woman talking about?" And she was like very adamant. I mean, you know, she goes, "Don't go too far to where I can't see," you know. And she would sit up on the porch in her old rocking chair, and she would dip that powdered Levi Garrett snuff, you know. And I dipped snuff for years, but I couldn't dip that powdered stuff. She'd come running out there looking, you know, in her nightgown, you know, and with the big old stick. She never would hit my friend, but she'd threaten, you know, "You go down that bottom, I'm gonna hit you with this, you know, stick," you know. So one day, I was out there, stay the night. I love to go out there and spend time out there with them. You know, there was like 40 acres, and it was just run around, do whatever. And we had hit a dirt bike and other stuff, you know. And so I went out there, stay for the weekend, you know. And I asked him, I was like, "Why is your granny so obsessed with this haints?" You know. He goes, "I don't know. She believes that there's these wolf-like things that live out there and that they'll eat us." And I was like, "This is ridiculous. Like, what is it with these people and these wolves?" You know, I never believed it. I was like a little kid, you know. But I was out there probably a year before I saw this thing, and I remember asking his granny, And I asked him, I said, why do you believe in it? She goes, because I've seen them. I said, well, what do they look like? She says they look like wolves, but they're really big. They can stand up on their hind legs and they can move around like men. And she's like, and sometimes you see them move around. They move really fast. And so I said, like Bigfoot. And she goes, ain't no Bigfoot. Like she didn't believe in Bigfoot, but she believed in that, you know. So you're going like, okay, so it's not Bigfoot. She goes, no, ain't no Bigfoot. She's like, these things will eat a Bigfoot. And I was like, okay. So she described them as being 7, 8 foot tall, and that they would roam around down there in that bottomland. And she said that she'd see them killing animals and eating them, and she'd seen them, and they'd been in that area for years. When she was a kid, she saw them.
Is that area unchanged still, Josh? Or is it
well,
populated?
my friend still lives out there, but he's kind of a recluse, and he don't even have a cell phone, so he's not on Facebook, anything like that. He's one of those people that like, I'm going to stay on my acreage and that's it. So I ran into him one time because I was driving by the feed store going to Taylor Cafe, which is right there is where they filmed Transformers with Mark Wahlberg. In fact, the scene, there was a Dogman sighting right across from where Mark Wahlberg had the scene with Optimus Prime, where he was fighting that bounty hunter robot or whatever. I was looking at that movie and I'm going, that's exactly where my friend's grandmother claimed to have seen one of these things right there underneath the railroad. It's right there. I'm going like, wow, they're filming literally right there. So anyway, there's a feed store there, and I was driving by, and I saw my buddy, and I said, hey, and we hadn't seen, we used to play football together. I hadn't seen him in years. And we started talking, and he says, yeah, I stay out there on my farm. I don't mess with nobody. And I asked him about the haint. He kind of lifted his eyes up like that, and he goes, I don't talk about that. And I said, have you seen one? And he just shook his head. He goes, yep. He goes, they leave me alone. I leave them alone. I don't talk about them. I'm like, wow. So it's just something he wasn't really interested in talking about.
So you're not tempted to reconnect and just go and do a bit of research there, or do you think
keep pushing him? Keep pushing him.
Tempting fate, maybe, like you said earlier. The deeper you look into these things, the more it looks back at you, kind of thing, isn't it?
It does. When we were kids, I think I was probably 12, and I think that was actually my first experience with this thing. Didn't see it, but I really believe we heard it, you know. And I didn't see it. Like I said, we were down in the creek and we were catching tadpoles, crawdads. We were looking for them. I don't know what we were going to do with them. We'd always catch them, and we were out there barefoot running around that creek, and we were getting closer to the holler. We shouldn't have been that close. We was where it starts to get dark. You know, like the trees kind of fold into each other, and it's a creek, and it gets dark, you know. So we were told always to stay out of that area, and of course we were getting closer to it, and I heard a kind of a low, kind of like a hum, like that, but it was reverberating, you know. And I was like, what is that? And I was with another friend of ours, and my friend said, one of my friends said, I think there's something out here, you know. And then my friend's little brother's like, it's Bigfoot. And I was like, because everybody was scared of Bigfoot, you know. And I was like, well, you know, your granny said that, you know, there ain't no Bigfoot out here, you know. And he's like, oh, there ain't nothing. There ain't no Bigfoot. There ain't no haints. There ain't nothing. This is just a bunch of stories. I don't believe in this crap. So we just kept doing it. Next thing you know, we hear snapping like something was walking, footfall. And I heard it, and I look up, and I was like, there's something out here. And we heard like a popping noise, and then like a kind of a low guttural like growl. We all took off running, and we ran through the creek. Well, we were always told to stay in the water as long as you could. If it was shallow enough, then it didn't slow you down, because obviously they knew what they were talking about. Canines hunt by scent. So if you stay in the water, and the longer you are, you know, from getting up into the land, they can't follow you. So we did that. We ran through the creek until it got kind of deep, and then we ran up into the, you know, in my feet back then, I was always outside. I was raised in the country till I was 15, you know. My feet were probably as hard as, like, you know, in this table right here, you know, like sandpaper. I couldn't feel anything. I was running on rocks, whatever. And so, something I could never do now, but I ran up the hill real fast, and my friend's little brother, I grabbed him and yanked him up, you know, and he was a few years younger than us, and he was screaming and crying. And I looked back, and I didn't see anything. I didn't see anything at all. And so we just ran. And then, of course, that was the one time I saw his grandmother really lose it, dude. And she threatened to whoop us all with a switch. You know, and she did spank my friend. She was like, I done told you to stay out of there. you stay out of there, and they don't come onto our land. We don't go to theirs. It was kind of like this weird thing she had, you know. So for years and years, I always, and we just, my friend never wanted to talk about it. He was very, very, very terrified of it. It was kind of like a warning to him. And so whenever what happened to me, I saw him at school, and he was just like, I told you, you know, he goes, my granny told you, you know. I was like, they exist. Cause he really, I think he started believing before I did. Cause I think he saw one when he was like 13 or 14. Whereas I didn't see one until I was 15. We're the same age. So I always wondered what that was. And I was like, you know, maybe that was, you know, a dog man or werewolf. I look back on it, you know, and I thought maybe when I was like 11 that maybe I had a run in with a Bigfoot, but I didn't see it, but I heard it, and I heard like this loud bang bang on a tree, and that area where I was living at that time, it was an area near Rockdale, Texas. It was known now. It's you know, from there to this other town called Giddings, I have gotten a little spattering of sightings that have come and gone over the years. Very much Bigfoot though. And so,
Josh, do you find when you're getting the sightings of the Bigfoot, you're not getting the sightings of the werewolf stroke dog man? Are they
right?
They don't intermix in the area. No,
not really. No, like the area in between there, that there's like you have a map back there with the little stuff on there.
Yeah.
Me and my brother like tried to put together like I looked at a map, and he was helping me, like I was putting the little pieces on there, you know. Well, I actually did it, but he was kind of helping a little bit. But we were looking at it, and I was looking at this corridor of Bigfoot sightings, and there was a very aggressive Bigfoot that was actually killing livestock near the town of Giddings, where actually one of my dad's half brothers lived. And so I did an interview. I interviewed a guy who drove out there one day with a buddy of mine, and we interviewed a guy who said he saw it, and he said it was about 8 foot tall, and it was just massive, humongous creature. Flat face, nothing like a dog man, nothing. And I asked him if he'd ever seen a dog man. He goes, are you talking about them things with the muzzle? I mean, he was an old rancher, you know, he knew what it was. And I said, nobody in Texas knew a dog man. They don't know what the heck that is. They're like, and I said, well, it looks kind of like a wolf. He goes, you know what? He goes, a buddy of mine out near Bastrop had an encounter with one of those. So he gave me the guy's number. He'd known the guy for years. They were fishing buddies. And that guy told me, he said, go to the town of Caldwell. And in that area over there is where there was a legend of these things. And actually, I was just looking at Reddit one day, and somebody had posted about a rake-looking creature right outside of Caldwell. You know, clawing around the trees and stuff, you know, and then it chased them. And it was a story that my wife had seen, and she's like, "Where is Caldwell?" And when she said that, my ears perked up, and I was like, "Oh, that's Central Texas," you know. So I read that, and I thought, it's very odd that you get these rake-type creatures that are these pale crawler-looking things in the same vicinity as Bigfoot or Dogman. They don't seem to have boundaries, those creatures. But it is true to me, for my money, that Dogman and Bigfoot typically stay in their own areas. Not always. I mean, there's exceptions, but the Devil's Backbone here in Central Texas, there's the east-west corridor, what we call, you know, the west side is the Dogman domain, and the east side is the Bigfoot domain. And I really believe that they try to avoid one another for whatever reason, probably because they're both apex predators and they'll kill each other. So it's best to just avoid each other, probably. You're not, you know, if you're a mountain lion, you're probably not going to want to go around a black bear. Just leave him be, you leave it be. You know, it has its territory. You have your territory.
Have you over the years, have you interviewed people in law enforcement or in positions of power that have got information on these things but actually don't want to come out and talk publicly?
Well, there was a guy that was a police. He's now deceased. I don't really want to say his name or talk about it because I don't know how his family would react to this. Okay. But we were at a barbecue cook-off, and he told me, one of my guards and my friend Scorpion, who works for me, that's his nickname. Everybody knows him as Scorpion. We were on that TV show on Travel Channel together. He told us after he had imbibed a little bit, you know, he had been drinking. He gave us some stories that I told on my show. And I think it was, hold on one second. Anthony. I don't know if Anthony can hear me. He's in the office, and he's about to go to boxing lessons. So I don't know. Hey, what is the name of the episode where the former police officer talks to me and Scorpion and what's his name about the Texas Wolfman. What is it called? Wolfman on the Prowl or something like that. I think it's called Wolfmen on the Prowl. But if you go back to that episode, it talks about this. There were some killings, and they were told that to say that they were not done there because they were found near the railroad cars. This guy told me that one of the victims looked like he'd been put through a blender.
Really?
So whenever he told us that, and of course, me and I don't want to say the other guy's name that was with me because he lives in San Antonio. I mean, he worked for me for years. He may not want his name mentioned on here because he works for the transit system there. So I don't know how people feel about saying their names, but Scorpion was with me, and then another one of my guards who heard this guy telling us this at the barbecue cook-off, and we're sitting there. We had a little golf cart we were in, and I was like, that's crazy. This is a police officer that was there for years that told us this. He said he really believed in these things. And he believed that back in the 60s, there was a series of murders that took place, but they were told, hey, this didn't happen here. And he was like, well, yeah, because he said, no, this didn't happen here. Okay, do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
This happened in another county, another town, and this body rode in on the railroad car. It was a rail rider hobo, as they called him back then, a homeless person. And he was killed. Okay, but it didn't happen here. Okay, so that because cotton season, you get all these people that come in there to work and they load these railroad cars. You don't want them going, oh no, the boogeyman's killing people, and then it slows everything down. The whole town depended on its cotton production. So it was just I think it was a move to keep everybody comfortable.
Before jumping away from your sighting, because I don't know what our listeners thought, but I thought it was absolutely brilliant. Loved hearing it. But when you had to pass it at close quarters, did you smell anything?
I don't remember a smell. A lot of people have said that they smelled something, whatever. I didn't. I think it was just like, my brain just either tuned it out or, because I don't remember a smell at all.
Some people that me and Les have interviewed for Wolflands, and sometimes comes in chat, one of the guys, and they got trapped in a particular forest with these things, and he said that one of the guys felt its presence long before they saw it, and quite unusual. And they were telling him his two friends that were being watched, but when this thing actually appeared and they could see it in its full form, he said we thought it were growling at us, and its breathing, it was so humongous. The sort of rib cage and monstrousness of this thing. It was actually its breathing, but it sounded like it were growling. So what about sounds, Josh? Did you hear anything?
Yeah, there again, like when I think back on it, I don't remember like specifically. I know it was making noise and it was shaking the fence, and I'm pretty sure it growled. But I just, your mind isn't even like focused on that. You're just trying to get by and survive. And I remember like hearing something, but it wasn't like so specific that I was just, just the main thing that I remember seeing when I turned to mine. I don't even think I turned like this. I think I just kind of looked with my eyes because I was too scared. But I just remember the paw, like the claws, the on the foot, this weird looking like a foot that looked almost like a raptor like type foot going up onto the fence, like it was judging its, to jump or whatever. I had a spider leap at me one time. I was working security, and I was walking through this corridor, and I saw this spider going up and down like that, and I was like, "Oh, that's odd." And then it just went woo, and I was like, "Whoa," and it just I jumped and looked, and I was like, "Where'd it go?" And then I saw it crawling away, and it just it reminded me of that, like it was like kind of preparing to leap, or whatever. And after subsequently, the reports that I've gotten from this thing made me think, "Holy crap, I was about to be eaten or whatever," because I think it was about to do that, like leap, and jump.
Yeah.
And my friend's dad coming out, I think, stopped it. That's what stopped it.
Josh, and it's not as daft as it sounds, this question. What do you think they are? Because obviously we're looking at that and you can see what it is, but do you think they're a purely physical thing, or do you think that, I don't know, people use the term interdimensional. Do you think they're here occasionally and transient passing through, or are we looking at living, breathing, flesh, blood, and bone creatures that are?
Yes, I say yes to all that because
yeah.
I believe that there's a metaphysical aspect to them. I believe that there is a physical aspect to them. I just did a set with Jody Cook. I don't know when that's going to release, but I think it was a really good set that we did. I call my discussions like with you guys sets. I did the set with them because it's ours.
Yeah.
And me and Jody were talking about it, and Jody was like, "Dude, these things. I mean, they're from the inner earth." Barton Nunley, same theory. Me and Linda I was on the phone with Linda Godfrey yesterday for an hour. Me, her, and Barton, and and I tell you right now, it comes up all the time. Interdimensional. Same thing with Bigfoot. I think Bigfoot is both. I don't think that you can put your finger on it, because I got a report up in Washington of a Sasquatch near Olympia running across the road, and these people were like, you could see through it.
Mm.
I'm not talking about the cloaking aspect of it. Now, I've done the show on that called The Shimmering Phantom, which was not, I don't really like that title, but we didn't want to say Glimmer Man because there's a movie called Glimmer Man. So Glimmer Man, that's kind of what they do, but they shimmer or whatever. But it was literally like it was solid. Then it just kind of was like see-through when their vehicle, it was right in front of their vehicle, the lights went right through it. And then it was like fading away. It was like, what is that? Is that the ghost of a Bigfoot, or is it going back into its dimension or its home, or what is happening there? We don't know. I mean, I had a report of the Serbian werewolf. Okay, this is a weird one. This is a case that me and my brother and my other friend helped cover. And it's very difficult to try to communicate with someone in Serbia. I mean, but we did it over the course of a couple months. We managed to get the story from these people. There was something that happened. A female was grabbed. She worked for them. She was heading up the stairs with some linen, and she heard like a swishing noise. She turns around, and there's like this circular-looking, thing opening up, and this dog, if you want to call it that, dogman werewolf was halfway in, like the upper body was out of this circle, and she couldn't see the rest of it, and it grabbed her and was trying to pull her, and it tore her clothing trying to pull her into that. Now, it's one thing to be attacked or be bitten or messed with, but for something to try to grab you and pull you into a portal or another dimension, it would probably fry my brain. I don't know about you, Paul, but we couldn't even get her to talk about it. She tried to get her to talk about it, and she was just not interested in it. She quit, obviously. There was another case, that me and this other podcaster covered that I worked with for about 6 years. And we talked about this because we talked about that on the show, where there was signs of forced exit, but not forced entry. Now, there was a case in San Diego that he had covered, and me and him kind of looked at it together, and he said, "What is this? What do you think?" I'm like, it's very similar to the Serbian case. Something exited, you know what I mean? But it didn't. Where did it come from? They were a couple, and what happened was they had renovated what was essentially a former castle, and it was a barracks, and then it had been blown to heck because of the Civil War. And it was in that no man's land in between where it changed hands multiple times over the years. There had been battles that had been fought there with the Turks and who knows who, and so who knows how much war and death had been visited upon that place. Kind of like the places in England and Scotland. I think it's Berwick-upon-Tweed. I know that's one. I mean, how many times did that change hands? I mean, you're going like, this is crazy, So at one time it was occupied by the Ottomans, and then another time it was occupied by the Greeks. And during different battles, different wars, the Serbians were there, obviously now. But at one time it was the Macedonians had it, and then of course the Croatians had it. And so who knows what was going on there? There was a sarcophagus that was unearthed. Of course, there was a sword that had a Templar symbol on it. I do have a replica of that sword, but it is so bizarre that the sword was being kept in a trunk at the foot of the bed, and the husband traveled to Slovenia regularly, which is another country in Europe, in case some people actually don't know where that's at, but that's another country. And he was a business, like he worked in finance, whatever, so he was gone a lot. So she was there alone with the servants, and once they finished building the castle or renovating what was essentially a castle, the barracks, they were sleeping in the barracks at one time, and it was extremely haunted. They had all kinds of weird stuff happening. which I couldn't really get into on that other person's show. So I did my show. We talked about this werewolf, but this thing like manifested out of thin air at the foot of the bed and began to try to open that chest. Now, there was an incident that took place where it was shot at and it went through a window. Obviously, police called, whatever, they come, they investigate. I mean, there's forced exit, no forced entry. Like, I mean, the same thing in the San Diego case. I mean, something jumped out, you know, where did it come from? It manifested, it just, you know, on its own. I don't know if these things have a capability that we don't have, or we don't understand, or we can't comprehend. I did something on my show once where I drew a two-dimensional character, and I said, this little character here, you know, and here's the circle, and he can see that circle, you know, like it looks like a line to him. But, you know, we can see everything that this little character is doing. We'll call him Tim or Tom. How about that? Tom can see everything in his two-dimensional world. But if you and I, Paul, were to go, you know, into his world, he couldn't comprehend it. It would be, he would not even be able to fathom it because we're three-dimensional. So the fourth dimension, they can see us, but we can't see them.
And we can't comprehend that.
And we can't comprehend that. So when they come and go, it's like they look like ghosts, or you know, it's like, what is this? You know, I don't know if you're familiar with the term jinn. It's an Arabic term. Yeah, of course. And so for the listeners that are listening, it means literally in Arabic, hidden ones. They're hidden from us. And it says, and there's a book called the Hadith, and of course it's a very esoteric, just like the Kabbalah is for the Jewish people. We don't really have that in the Christian faith. We don't really have an esoteric book unless you want to say the non-canonical book of Enoch.
Yeah.
But these things exist a right angle from a right angle. That's what it says. Well, if you look at a right angle from a right angle, it's like we can't really comprehend it. It's just kind of vague. It's like, you know, they live, and then it says they live in this green mountain range, you know. I've often wondered, the planet Venus is known to have a green, you know, hue to it. And I've often wondered, like, maybe they come from another realm and they're like, well, their atmosphere wouldn't support, yeah, it wouldn't support life like we know it, but it could support their life because they aren't necessarily physical beings. And so maybe they are celestial. Now, the other theory I have is that they are inner earth beings, and that those are where you get the physical creatures. I think in the LBL, the Land Between the Lakes, I think what Barton, there was a witness that came forward, and we did a whole set about that on the live stream. It just went on and on about the LBL. Everybody was investigating it 6 ways from Sunday. The NADP, Jody Cook and Nick Valenti were on the show. We had Barton Nunley come on the show, and there was a witness named Roger who claimed that he had witnessed an Amish family being killed in the LBL. Now, the descriptions he gave of these creatures, I and Ryan Tremblay, who we've done work together, like on Whisper to a Scream, and he's been on my show, we came up with this idea that they were devil monkeys. I call them devil monkeys because there's a type of creature called the rebob in Northern California, and that I have gotten, like, since we did the devil monkey episode. We actually got a story about that. Like we got somebody that was actually chased. You know, there was one out of the Napa Valley about these that was even flying. Like, and I'm going, like, flying. It's like, sounds like something out of the Wizard of Oz. But you know, there are creatures like the bat squatch. You know, so you get some of these creatures that come out of these same areas that have, you know, or they're adjacent to each other. Linda Godfrey proposed a theory that they actually, when they're in our world, they need to eat and sleep and you know, just like we do. And the longer that they're in our world, they actually have to become more physical, and they have to become more accustomed to their environment, and they become more physical. Then once they leave our environment back to the fourth dimension or wherever they come from, they change.
Okay. Well, we'll just pause for a moment because I know you can talk for hours and hours, Josh, just non-stop. But we'll see whether Les has got any questions from our listeners or Les, are you there?
Yeah, I don't know if anybody can hear me.
Oh, I can.
Yes, yeah, I can hear it on the stream there. Okay, thanks, Josh, for those accounts, and especially your personal account. That was
brilliant, right?
Absolutely fascinating, to say the least. And we do have some questions in. Let me start. I'll just start linking from what you last just said. Joe Weeks is asking, are dogmen linked to aliens? So that follows on from what you've just been saying, Josh.
Do I think that they could be? That is something that I was going to get into with Jody, but we had talked so much about all this other inner Earth stuff when we recorded with him, that Jody, much like Paul, is going to come back and do another set, and we're going to talk about celestial werewolves, celestial wolfmen. We did one called Celestial Bigfoot. Now we're going to do one that's called Celestial Wolfmen, and that's going to be when Jody comes back on. He's got some really interesting stories about them possibly being, I know Linda had talked about it in one of her books too. If I postulated on that, I would say that it is possible that maybe they did come from somewhere else, and maybe that's why they're in the inner Earth. You get these weird stories about reptilians, a lot of them. I get a lot of reports about reptilians, people seeing eyes slitting up and things like that, and I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and he was one of those people that really didn't believe in anything, and now he's like, I believe 100% that aliens walk among us. This is what he told. I'm not saying this is what I believe, this is what he told me. And I was like, why do you believe that? And he says, dude, I saw a guy that looked, like, it was just, obvious. Like, he goes, dude, you could see his eyes. Everything was weird. David Weatherly actually wrote in one of his books about he called them the snakeheads, a people that had this, they had weird looking heads, and he think that they wore wigs, and that they were actually, it's a really crazy story. And I can't remember which book it was, but he came on my show on a live stream. He jumped on there and he told me about it. And if you go back in the archives of my show, you'll see it. But Weatherly had did a story that was very intriguing about the snakeheads, and that they lived in a suburban neighborhood, just like normal people, but that they were doing weird things. Like, they would see them in the middle of the night chasing cats, and one person saw their head and it looked weird, like they knew that they were wearing wigs. They were seen in a grocery store. It's a really weird story. And all they did was buy meat. Somebody had gone over there to talk to them, and they saw meat cartons everywhere inside, and they didn't have any furniture. Are those aliens? Are those reptilians? Did they come from the inner Earth and decide to take up residence in a suburban neighborhood? Are they your neighbors? Could your neighbor be a werewolf or a vampire? I don't know. I mean, there's some weird stuff out there, dude. I mean, I ex-girlfriend a long time ago, had an encounter in El Paso with something that she really believed was a vampire. Well, she didn't say, I saw a vampire. She had a weird encounter with something that I dubbed a vampire because there was no other way to describe it, On my Supernatural Sin City episode, there was an account that I did where a guy saw a pretty girl, and he's like, oh, what is she doing hitchhiking out here in the middle of nowhere? Well, probably a good idea not to pick up anybody in the middle of nowhere because something could happen. And it did, and she began to try to attack him. And it was a very similar scenario to what happened to this girl that I dated. And I actually kind of felt guilty because I pushed her to tell me that story. She didn't want to talk about it, but I'm very tenacious. I want to get these stories, and so I kept asking. I said, can you please just tell me? Because it did upset her, and it made her cry, and I felt guilty for that. But getting information, because later on when you get stories that are very similar, like I got one out of New Orleans, and I got, and of course, hers from El Paso, and then one that was right outside of Las Vegas. A guy was driving to Las Vegas, and he sees this pretty girl. It nearly killed him. What was it? I don't know. Was it a vampire? I don't know. I mean, you can say, you can speculate, hey, yeah, I think that was a vampire. Most of the time, people don't call me up and go, hey, Josh, I saw a gargoyle. You know, they say I saw something weird. It was flying and landed behind my car. You know, and I will say, okay, that goes into the category of gargoyle. Or if it's really weird, it's a one-off. Or if they call me up or hit me up and they go, hey, you know, buddy, I saw this thing and I was flying around, and that goes into the garbage bin because, you know, that person's, you know, they're not on the up and up, you know, they can't even be sober enough to talk to you. But, and it is sometimes, you know this, Paul, and people don't realize this, there's an underside to this. It's very hard sometimes to get stories. I got one about the Haskell Rascal. Yeah. Well, this guy the whole time is watching a NASCAR event and he's screaming and cussing and just kind of halfway telling me the story. I said, sir, I guess I can call you back at another time when it's more convenient. And he says, there's not going to be another time. Take it or leave it. With my buddy, this is what I saw. It looked like a wolf. I don't know, you know, and then he, you know, I had to be very polite because it's a very interesting story. And there are stories of Haskell County, which is interesting to me because I lived in Haskell as a little kid. And we'd always heard about the Haskell Rascal. So I thought, wow, it's some sort of Bigfoot. Well, it's not. It's like a small snouted dog man. It's not overly large, but it's a type of dog man. And so you start thinking, why is it that particular dog man looks different than this particular dog man? And then you get the ones that come out of Devil's Backbone. They look specifically different, you know, than these other ones. They look like timber wolves on two legs. So you start to go, I can't say that it's demonic, purely demonic, and it's like 100% metaphysical, because why are there variations in different areas? You know, like Paul Tremblay, Paul Tremblay, my friend, he came on my show and we talked about the hyena, upright hyena cryptids, because he saw one. You get those. Now, when Ken Gerhard came on my show, we actually talked about it was an episode about prehistoric creatures. You know, do they still exist? Could they still exist? Well, one of the things that he said that I didn't know, he schooled me on this, and he said that there was a type of hyena that was native to North America that wasn't actually a hyena. Now, hyenas are actually part of the weasel family.
Yeah.
And I knew that. I knew that they're like a pine marten, a wolverine, you know, a ferret. Basically, those are all the weasel family. The hyena is the largest of the weasel family. But this was not that. This was a canid from North America that actually looked like a hyena, but it was a canine. And now we know that the dire wolf is not really a wolf at all. It's a prehistoric canine, but it just, you know, if you want to use the word evolve, some people don't want to believe in evolution, so adaptation, whatever. Either way, you're looking at something that adapted to look that way. And you know, then you go to Australia, look at the Tasmanian tiger. That creature has the jaws and the head, very wolf-like, but they're not related at all. They're separated by millions of years. So nature has a way of kind of like, you know, pushing out what you need. One of the things that I talked about on I don't remember what show it was. It might have been one of mine, but I've talked about this before, that I believe that what if these creatures were a type of dire wolf? This is something I thought about. And they learned that there was an advantage to standing upright, to seeing over the grass, seeing the prey, and then they get back down on all fours. I've seen something do that, you know, and they kind of stand there, and my friend's dog used to do it, and he would put his paws up like that, and I would be like, dude, your dog is so weird, you know. It was Doberman Pinscher. He was a cool dog, but he would do that, and he would all the time, you know, and he was like, it was something that he learned to do because he got a better vantage point. People report these dogmen standing up, they hear pop, pop, pop. That is some sort of like joint manipulation happening. I always believe that.
So
well,
here's
the flip side. Do what?
It kind of implies that it's not a natural stance if you're doing joint.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And here's the thing. Before people go, that's exactly that proves that it's physical. Let me tell you something else. Now, Paul, I'm sure you know this. If you've investigated hauntings, the popping sound is actually very common.
Yeah.
I had it happen in my own studio. I hate to say it, but I was with my nephew, and he was about 4 or 5 feet away from me, and in between us, it sounded like somebody had taken bubble wrap and just went real fast. We were like, what was that? So, you know, you get that popping noise from hauntings, too. I investigated a case where There was a dog man involved, and I'm actually in the process of trying to put together the information to write my book about it. And I'm hoping that I can do that. But anyways, this case was very in depth, and I told it on another guy's show. But and on that show, he was very grounded in the physical aspect of it, so I wasn't really allowed to get into too far into the metaphysical. But they were hearing this popping noise throughout the house. But when this creature would come to the window to talk to the little boy, it would stand up, and he told it, his mother, he said, "Mommy, it snaps." What is that? And she says, he's like, "It snap, snap, snap." And then I know he's there. And that he was communicating with the little kid, didn't say much other than, "Come outside. You need to come outside. You need to come outside." Wanting him to go outside.
As in mind speak.
Telepathically, yeah, not speaking with its mouth, yeah. And so he said, "Mommy, the man wants me to come outside to play." And, one day she's walking through the hall carrying her laundry. She looks and she sees it, and she flies backwards, and, and she screams. And she said this thing was like halfway in the window because the little boy was opening the window for it. It wasn't attacking him, but it had its, very, very human-like clawed hands on the windowsill, and it stuck its head in, and it, like, at her, And the little boy had never seen that aspect of it, so he got down and was scared and crawling backwards, scared because he had never seen this thing show its scary side. And so it just popped out. Now, another thing that was happening in that house is they were seeing a shadow, what we know as the Hat Man. There was a lot of weird stuff going on in that house. The blender came on one night by itself, and somebody had stuffed a bunch of stuff into it. The washer and dryer had like bounced off and fallen over. Just a lot of weird things that were going on there. And then there was a door that was eventually it kicked in when they moved out. They went to go live with the sister and the mom. And so she said, "We moved out." Well, I actually know these people personally, and I know how stubborn her husband was. It took this creature, I think it was a couple days before Christmas, and he was walking out, to go to some Christmas party or something, and this thing like leapt out at him. Now, that is when he figured out, like, okay, these people, my family wasn't making this up, But I found out later on that he may have actually seen it. The brother-in-law had said he might have seen it before, and he was in denial about it. Now, the month of December, to me, that's an important thing because you get a lot of reports in the month of December. I don't know why that is. I know that between October and December, you get a whole the dog man reports go way up, and it's really weird. It's something that one of my old colleagues that I no longer work with, but I used to talk to him all the time about that. It is a weird thing. We would get a whole bunch of reports coming in from those months. There was a story, though, that I got from a woman who was attacked leaving a Christmas party by what I call a gugwi. It didn't actually get to her, but it broke her passenger side window out and reached into her. And when she described the face, it was really weird. She said if you took like long hair, like a guy like wearing a wig almost, long scraggly hair, and then she said, but then the face was kind of narrowed, and then there was a small muzzle, but that the upper body, she said that other than that, it had a pronounced brow ridge, weird looking features, it's almost like a human looking. And so I asked her this, and I don't want to lead the witnesses. I don't like to lead them and go, well, let me kind of lead you into it because that's not right. You're not supposed to do that. So to be a productive, I don't know what we are, journalists, whatever the heck you want to call us, researchers, I said, did it look more like a werewolf looking thing or was it a Bigfoot? And she's like, I don't know. I said, human? And she answered us and she said, probably all three. If you mixed them all together, she saw it when she was driving away. She said that the legs were she didn't see the lower part of the legs. But she said it was very straight, which to me, that's a gugwi, and what we call a gugwi. And then now I didn't coin that term. I have nothing to do with it. But a gugwi is what a lot of people are calling something that looks something or something similar to like some sort of chimeric cross between a dogman and a Sasquatch, and they are extremely, extremely aggressive. Now, there's a guy who's got a very popular television show. And I was very unhappy with him because he told one of my witnesses that was seeing something very similar to that. Oh, they won't hurt you. And he's done this before, and I'm going like, how irresponsible is that? Because I get reports, of something chasing someone's car or throwing a big boulder at them, and you're going like, or chasing this one report I got from a guy near Spokane in Washington, a lot of Bigfoot activity up there. This thing had to be a gugwe because it had the short muzzle with the big teeth, and it chased him downhill, and then it knocked over his truck. He was a meter reader, a gas meter. Of course, he quit. and so you're sitting there getting these reports of these things being highly aggressive and unstable, and then they're like, oh, they're not going to hurt you. They won't hurt you if you don't hurt them. You can't depend on that. I mean, that's crazy. So.
Excellent. Les?
Yeah.
Any more questions?
Some great reports there as well, Josh. Thanks for that. A question from me, I think, Josh, is all these reports that you get, is there any physical evidence resulting from any of these encounters?
Well, there's been a lot of people that claim it, but I haven't seen it. And I've seen hair, fur, whatever, sent to me in pictures. I've seen what they claim to be video footage. I just can't. I don't. And that to me would lend credence to the idea that they are metaphysical, because we're not getting a lot of evidence. We're seeing these things. I saw it. You're getting hundreds, thousands even of reports of Bigfoot, Dogman, Bigfoot, Dogman crossover. I don't know what that is. The rake, what they call the rake, but the crawler, which could be a Wendigo or who knows what it is. You get reports of flying humanoids, all kinds of stuff, ghost activity, just all kinds of stuff. But there's no real solid proof. I mean, you can't really say that there's, the evidence. That's what I argue with the physical people all the time.
That's across the board, though, isn't it, Josh? With all aspects of this paranormal that we're looking into, with tons and tons of anecdotal evidence. I mean, if we've got scales, it's literally bang. It's loaded. And we're either all liars, you're lying, I'm lying, everyone else who's giving you these accounts. We know we're going to get people who are at times going to lie or bent truth.
Unhinged or charlatans, yeah.
But it only takes one or two people to be telling truth. It makes everything real. And your story, it's absolutely compelling. It's a brilliant account. And so are probably the hundreds of people that have come to you. And because, like you said before, you'll hear a report and it goes in bin. You don't just swallow everything that everybody tells you. I get people telling me stuff. I'm polite to them unless they're rude. You know what I mean? But I don't think to myself, God, I've got to talk about this. I've got to write about this. I just know it's not real. But yeah, I mean, I push it all the time with Wolflands, and I'm sold on these witnesses that we've got for this documentary. And hopefully at some point I shall get you in touch with some of them, and you'll see what I mean. But
absolutely,
it's your show, Josh, and I'm riveted. I'm as happy to listen to you as everybody who's in this audience now. So if Les has got any more questions, hit us with it.
Yeah, I've got Teresa Walker is asking. I know we've talked a lot about physical and metaphysical aspects of the Dogman, but she's asking, could it be a lab creation, a laboratory creation?
That's very possible. I got a friend that she worked really closely with a guy who actually is known as the Montauk. I really want to get in touch with this guy. I just haven't had time. I'm just so busy. But he's somebody I want to speak to. And he actually covered a case here in Austin, which had nothing to do with Dogman. But the Montauk Project. A lot of people, they say, hey, look at that. It's like this MK Ultra. All this weird government. What are they doing and how are they doing it? I had a guy tell me, he's a former military guy, served in Afghanistan actually. And I met him through former co-host, and he was a really very friendly guy. And he actually told us some really compelling things. One of the things that he said was that he knew for a fact that there had been government, that they had actually crossbred these creatures, that they did exist, and that they had created a type of soldier type of Dogman that could be controlled through frequency. Now, you know, there's different frequencies. There's megahertz frequencies, you know, 432, 777. They all do something different, you know. And supposedly that they just kind of lie dormant, and then they pop up like a, you know, like whatever, when that frequency is given to them, and then they go and do whatever it is. Here's what I'm going to tell you about that. I believe that science and magic are the same. I know that sounds silly to the uninitiated, but as Bane said in the Batman, we are initiated. So it's not silly in the way that, you know, you can take a dog whistle and teach your dog to do all kinds of things. I was a dog handler for a while, and I know how that works. Now, a dog man, I don't know. How unstable is that? These soldier types they talk about are these really big, they call them fatheads. He claimed that they made their heads like twice the size of a normal head. Now, he said that what those are basically like a government project that they were created to kill. They go out, they hit the target, and it's done. The reason I brought up the science and magic thing is because the cadejo, or the black dog, which we discussed, Paul.
Yeah.
I had an account from my great aunt's friend who died years ago. She had lupus, but she was a very nice lady. And I remember, as you know, I would go like all the time to go pick up my great aunt. She was like my abuelita, which is my grandmother. She died before I was born, but my great aunt kind of stepped in and was kind of like my grandmother. So I would take her out to eat at least 2 or 3 times a week. And I would go to my hometown, and she had this one little friend that would go with her. And she gave me a very compelling story. I was there with my brother and my friend, and she told us that she saw the cadejo. And so I told her, I said, can you tell me what it looked like? She said, an enormous black dog with like smoke coming off of its body. And I said, smoke? She goes, I don't know, like there was like this black coal smell, and there was this black smoke, whatever. She said it ran across a field, and it was because of a curse that was put on somebody because esposo was cheating their significant other. I couldn't remember if it was a husband or a wife. But she said the esposo, which is like, you know, husband, wife, whatever. And that this thing attacked this individual because of a jealousy, a celoso, as they say in Spanish, was tearing him apart. It waited till he went to get water by himself, came running out of the clearing of a group, you know, trees into the cotton field and attacked this man by the water truck. By the time everybody got over there, it had mauled him to death, and then it ran back into the woods and was gone. Sounds very similar. Here's the weird thing about it. The body of this man was just like nothing had happened. Everybody witnessed a dog-like creature attacking him and chewing him apart. But there was no, when they observed him, his heart had just stopped. It was cardiac arrest. And they said it was a heat stroke. So she said that she knew of this happening before too, not just in that one instance, but she had heard stories of it when she was younger, but she never believed it until she was like, I think she said she was 18, 19, something like that, and she was a teenager, and this, she witnessed it, right. You know, and so she's like, if I wouldn't believe it if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes. Now, my aunt, who had never seen the cadejo or the hombre lobo, she believed in both of them and was very like, pray the rosary, the 12 truths, you know, the prayer of and do all these things and you'll be safe. And she was always giving me holy water and crosses, crucifixes. And I'm not Catholic. My mother, even though she's Hispanic, is not Catholic either. She converted, you know, to Protestant years ago. But my mom, she never really gave up on the superstition. Like, we would have to go to San Juan once a year, and I hated it because it's like a 6-7 hour drive down into South Texas, and I would be like, oh God, we got to go to San Juan to the mission. And I asked my mother, I was like, we're not even Catholic. Why do I have to go to catechism? Why do I have to go? And she goes, because my aunt and my family are, and so you just have to play along, you know? She's like, I don't care if you believe it or not, just go and do it, you know? And plus my dad's stepmother, my step-grandmother, which raised me on the other side, because my dad's mom died when he was little, she was Catholic, and so they were like both kind of like, okay, you have to go to Catholic. So I had to learn CCD, which is actually cool in the way that I went to a Bible Scholar Academy when I was a kid, or a Bible Science Academy. So I learned a lot about the Bible, the ins and outs and all that. I learned it inside and out. And then I also went to CCD, so I learned from their Bible. So it kind of started me on the journey of theology, of biblical theology. And I started to study different translations of it. And I did try to teach myself the languages to learn the true translations of it. So anyways, that being said, we went to San Juan, and on the way down there, I think this was by design, but my Thea would start telling me terrifying stories. Manos Paludos was one of them. She would tell me, and she would tell me the story every time, and it never ceased to be scary. Manos Paludos means like the hairy hand. The story in a nutshell is that there were these men down in Mexico, and they were playing cards, and they were all barachoteresos, as we say in Spanish, and they're playing cards, and the barkeep comes and tells them, hey, andale, get out of here, I'm closing up, and they one of them pulls out a cuerda, and that's a Spanish, it's a pistol, and tells them, hey, you back off, these are bandidos, I'm gonna play cards with the devil all night if I want to. You go on, give me some more, cerveza, So this guy, he gets like, okay, he's like, and he goes over there. Next thing you know, these people are drunk. These bandidos are drunk, and they're playing cards. And next thing you know, there's a pair of hands that are playing cards with them, and they're hairy. And they're hairy clawed hands, and they're not even realizing it. Next thing you know, it's choking them and killing them. And the barkeep is like, It's really what it is like it's a folk tale. It's what do you call that? Like an urban legend, right? Yeah. And then she would tell me about the lechuza. Now, every Mexican person in the world will tell you a lechuza story. What it is like an owl by day, and at night it becomes like it's a woman by day and an owl creature at night that transforms. Sometimes it'll have a human-like face. Now, my cousin on my dad's side, he's white, he actually witnessed this. He saw one, and he goes, I would never believe it if I didn't see one. I've never seen it, but then you have La Llorona, which is the legend of a woman that drowned her kids, and then she goes to bodies of water. My nephew Anthony had an experience which what he thinks may have been that entity. It's also known as a water spirit. When I did my show on Halloween, on last year's Halloween episode, the word "fueth" appeared on my window, on my truck window, like literally before me and another guy that works with me named Russell Clark. And you can ask him about this. He's my nephew's uncle on the other side. So I looked it up and I couldn't find anything about it. And I thought, this is weird, but it was spelled with the A, kind of like in the old English style. And so when I looked at it, my friend Scorpion looked at it and he goes, what if it's an A, not an E? So we looked at it, we found out that Fueth is actually a water spirit. So when we were sitting there talking about it, about Russell Clark's experience with something that had jumped into his swimming pool, the word appeared. I'm not kidding, it was crazy. And so we looked into it. It's actually a water spirit. Well, I believe that that's what La Llorona is. It's a water spirit. La Chusa it's like an elemental. It's like an air spirit. It's you know what I mean? Like they all have their own. The cadejo is from the earth. The brimstone smell and all that could be fire. I don't know. The hombre lobo could be the earth spirit. I don't know. I don't know how this works. I know that the Aztecs had a god named Xolotl, who was a dog-headed god that they sacrificed for the harvest. They would kill their own children and feed it blood, and so Xolotl was a very unsavory guy. And then you have Totec of the Mayan, culture. It was also a shape-shifting, I think he was like a feline. Some argue that it was a canine. And then you had Cocopelli, which is like this little chupacabra. It's weird. You get all these like myths and legends, and you put them all together.
So, Josh, how do you think that ties in then? And I'm not dismissing the fact that these could be some kind of military project, but they go back much further. They go back much further. So, is your theory of science and magic? Is that?
I believe that our governments have figured out a way to look at CERN. Okay, look at CERN. If you look it up, and then CERN is the god of mischief. It's the Celtic. It wasn't by accident. Let's just name it CERN. No, they did that because Saturna it's the same thing. Saturn, Saturna, those are the Roman god and the Celtic. The names are all the same. It's they have figured out a way, and I really believe that if you look at it biblically, they may have opened up the abyss. Apollyon in the Bible, Abaddon, You know, Abaddon is the abyss. Apollyon is which is Apollo. I mean, you know, and you look at what they've done. I mean, you got people with the Mandela effect. It's so weird. It just all ties in. I believe that it's all relative, and you got these all this stuff going on. You know, like people saying, well, you know, Ed McMahon was Publishers Clearinghouse. Now he's not. You know, are they jumping timelines? Are they making chimeric creatures? Are they, you know, are there reptilians and dogmen in Dulce and the bases in Dulce? Or what, you know, the Rendlesham Forest? I mean, what was that? I mean, you know, what's going on here? I mean, you know, like there's a connection here. I think that that to the military, the government, whoever you want to call it, I mean, they've probably caught up. Like, to them, magic is science. They've figured it out. You know what I mean? But to us, you know, if you were a primitive person and you lived in an island and you'd never seen a plane, you'd be like, that's a Thunderbird.
Yes, yeah,
You know?
that would be perceived as magic, wouldn't it? You know,
Magic, yeah.
yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah.
And,
It drops food out of it, and then if the plane crashes, you're going to go up to it and try to get food out of it because you don't know any better. It's like being, like I said, in the third dimension, everything coming in from the fourth dimension is some sort of magical thing to us. When to them, they can see everything that we do, but we can't see them. Just like we can see Tom in the two-dimensional world, he can't see us, nor can he perceive us. We're like ants. You know, if you're driving down an interstate highway and you have an ant mound on the side of the road, you know, just for a minute, contemplate that those ants are just living their life. They're not cognizant that we even exist. They don't even know that, and they certainly don't know that there's a highway there, that there's an interstate or busy cars going by. They have no clue. They're just living their lives. And, you know, if you were to go over there and put water on them and destroy their whole world is now gone like a flood, you know? I mean, it's over. I mean, it's like Noah's Ark. I mean, boom, their whole world is washed away in seconds, and they don't know what happened. The gods are angry. They they destroyed our world, you know? I believe that's a lot what's going on. I think that's what's going on. I think science and magic have merged, and I think that they figured out a way to do things that we think of as magic, you know? Because if you look at people who cast spells, and if you were to break it down, a lot of it, people are using like geometric patterns and shapes, you know? You're using different stars and symbols and whatever. I mean, you know, when I've had witnesses tell me that they see geometric patterns and shapes coinciding with their experiences. One in particular, a soldier type, a fathead dogman type, this woman and her husband saw a weird-looking triangle. It came out of a triangle. Not a portal, not a circle, a triangle. Like, what is that? Why was it blue? Why was the color blue? I don't know what that means. Why, you know, one of the guys came on my show, his name's Richard, and he was in a field up in Washington or Oregon, and these balls of light, 2 balls of light appeared, and these dogmen jumped out of them. If somebody told you that and you didn't know, and you, like I said, you weren't initiated, you'd be like, man, you're crazy, dude. What are you talking about? No, I get those reports all the time. Why do we see light everywhere, and then next thing you know, Dogman and Bigfoot are around?
That's just what I was going to say. That was going to be one of my questions, but I haven't even needed a mother, Josh, you know. But the point is, do you find them in the Dogman, the Bigfoot phenomena, the areas, they're actually multi-phenomena areas as well then? You've got other things happening. That, like you touched on earlier, you've been on a show a few years ago, we're talking about the woo, should we say, was suppressed, and let's keep it flesh and blood. But in my experience, it's not. It's there. It's happening. These are multi-phenomena areas. And if you've got the Bigfoot type reports or the werewolf stroke dogman type reports, you've got, if you look and you want to look, I mean, a lot of researchers, they're that close-minded that they just want to stick to, in my opinion, the flesh and blood type creature. But if you look hard enough, there's lots of other stuff. There's UFO reports, there's poltergeist activity, ghost activity, you know, and are you finding that?
Yeah, absolutely. And that was the problem and why I needed to expand into my own show, Paranormal Roundtable, because on that particular person's show, which you've been on there too, you aren't really allowed to tell that aspect of it on that show because that, and so I think it did a disservice to a lot of people because, you know, you're only going to pluck that one compartmentalized, you know, part of it and put it there and say, yeah, this is what we're dealing with. When in reality, there's a whole lot more going on. And one of the stories I know that was really compelling to me in Barton Nunnelly's book in Humanoids, which I think is one of the best books about this subject that I've ever read. There was a child. I told this on my show, I think Tuesday actually. That they were playing hide and seek. He crawled under a bed. Well, this werewolf-looking creature comes into the room. He's like staring at it, and he sees the pawed feet, whatever. He looks up. It's wearing like a suit, and it looks kind of like the big bad wolf, but like a werewolf, Well, I had a friend years ago who's now passed on, but she had told me a story of a haunting that was going on in her house in Waco. So I gave her a ride home one night after work. It's a good 100 miles, but we were friends, and she got kind of stranded, by her friend. Her friend, whatever, left her, and so I had to give her a ride. So on the way there, she told me all this stuff about this haunting that was going on in her house. Over the course of the next few months of talking about it and going to that house and talking to her family, one of the little boys saw a werewolf dressed as a clown. That's why Barton Nunnelly's book, when he had that story in there, I was thinking, this is so weird because I've heard this before. And so me and Barton, I tried reaching out to him and telling him, hey, I want to correspond with you. Barton's a very busy guy. Actually owns a very large painting company, just like I own a security company. This isn't our main bread and butter. So he's a very busy guy. I'm a very busy guy. So we had to coordinate trying to get together and talk. And we went back and forth. And then for years we didn't talk. And then, as fate would have it, the whole LBL thing broke out, and Barton was in the middle of that, and so we started talking, and now we talk all the time. He's been on my show just recently. One of the things that was so compelling about that story was that I was like, where did I hear this before? The million-dollar question is, was this a werewolf-type creature that was pretending to look presentable to these children? Okay, obviously it's some sort of spiritual entity. And if it is a spiritual entity, then why didn't it just make itself look like a clown? Why be a werewolf pretending to be a clown? Because they said that it looked like the big bad wolf. Now I've talked to these boys, now they're older, whatever. And one of them said it looked like a werewolf with a red nose, like trying to play like, hey, I'm a clown, And they were staring at it like, what is this? Well, this entity, whatever it was very wolf-like because they saw a wolf just like a regular timber wolf, like in their garage one night when they were pulling in with their dad. And this thing just literally, according to one of the witnesses, started to like fold its legs out flat and go flat and then crawled up and in through the wall. And he goes, if he was a 7-year-old kid at the time, he goes, if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I wouldn't believe it. I would have thought this is just, and he goes, for a long time, he goes, I think I just dismissed it and thought it was a dream. He's like, but then when I asked other family members about it, when they were having Thanksgiving dinner, and they started talking about the haunting in that house, that story came up, and he's like, so that was real. I thought this was like I thought it was dreaming this,
It was actually an event, in my opinion, because it weren't just one person that had seen it and labeling it possibility of a dream. There's two or three people, and four. I don't know how many people saw that, Josh, but they can't all.
Yeah, there were four.
They can't be sharing a dream, can they? So
no.
There's a reality to this, but once again, it throws it to the realms of what we would consider magic.
Magic or metaphysical, yeah.
Yeah.
A fourth dimensional being, that would be nothing. Maybe it's just leaving our realm, going back to where it came from. Why was it wolf-like? I got a report when I did the Chupacabra episode. I consulted with my dear friends Nick Redfern and Ken Gerhard back and forth. Showing them stories that I had gotten from witnesses and what do you think of this and blah, 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 because I wanted to do a good episode. The Chupacabra is a very, very big subject, and especially in Latin America. And so it took me a while before I finally did it, because I wanted to make sure that I was on top of my game with it. So I got all the reports that I could about it to stuff them into the show. I worked with a guy who was from Puerto Rico years ago, a company that I worked security with, and he told me a fantastical story. This guy, I had never really talked to this guy. He's an ex-military guy, but he wasn't like, just very laid back. And I worked with him one day, and there was a place we used to have an account at, Borden is a place I used to work at. And so we started talking, and I told him I was really into the paranormal and stuff, and I was reading a Brad Steiger book, actually. you know, because I read books about this stuff. And so he said, what is that about? And I told him, and he goes, you ever heard of the chupacabra? And I said, oh, of course, yeah, my mom's Mexican. I've heard of the chupacabra, you know. And he goes, you know, I got a crazy story about that. And so I pulled out my journals, and I used to write. So I was like, go ahead, you know, and I wrote down, you know, and he started telling me about it. And the next time I saw him at the office, we were getting our paychecks, and I saw him, and I said, hey, you mind telling me that story again? Because that's the best way to really vet somebody is to read. They you know, yeah. If it's a lie, then they've rehearsed it very well, or you know, yeah. And so he you know told me again. He said this is a story that happened, and so it was basically, long story short, what it pertains to is this wolf-like creature that had flattened itself out and was literally using, like, he didn't say it was a tongue. He said it was like a long tube-looking thing coming out of its mouth, and it was stabbing a chicken. And his grandfather went out there and shot it. And when it did, it started to flip around and kind of folded itself up and then kind of popped back out into like a wolf. He didn't say it was a wolf. He said it was wolf-like, you know. But he said it had a snout, you know, which, like we had talked about earlier, creatures, you know, they adapt, evolve, whatever, to use whatever. But he said it had a snout like a wolf, and it had sort of like paws, and it took off. But when his grandfather shot it, spines popped out of its back. So very weird, but also it's reminiscent of the chupacabra that you hear about in Puerto Rico. Now, here in Texas and in Mexico, you get these reports of a chupacabra. It's really a blue dog. And Ken Gerhard knows very, very much about that because I've seen one. And it's not even that rare, really. It's a weird. We don't know what it is. We know. I think the mitochondrial DNA says that it's on the mother's side was like a coyote, but they couldn't figure out what the father's side was. I don't know the whole. It was on the History Channel. Ken was on there. A woman in South Texas had shot one. I think down in I can't remember the name of the town where she shot it, but anyway, she shot one, and Ken went down and investigated it. It had been taxidermied, and they showed it, and it looked very similar to something that me and my wife saw. We saw two of them run across the road one day. So when I told Ken about it, Ken was like, actually, they're not very rare. He goes, they're not really a cryptid anymore because they're not really, we've found species, we found specimens of them. Well, their teeth are very weird. They're very elongated, and they look almost like, you know, they could use them to bite into you and suck blood. Now, that's a different creature than what you get. Nick Redfern's research, what he did with the chupacabra, going to Puerto Rico. Here's the weird thing. I was talking to Albert Rosales the other day. I don't know if you know Albert Rosales. He has written, Paul, I got to hook you up with him. Albert has written book after book after book of decades of research about humanoid encounters. One of the things I asked him about, because he's down in Miami, he's Cuban. I said, there was a friend of mine who was Cuban who told me, he said, not only did they this is messed up, but he said his family used to smuggle drugs, but he said we would smuggle exotic animals. And my friend, his name was Jose, he goes, man, I'm talking like really, really weird stuff, man, like chupacabras, man. So he tells me that he's kind of telling me and my brother and another guy we worked with that, and I was like, what, chupacabras? So I heard it, you know, so he's kind of telling my brother that, and I walk over and I said, can you repeat what you just said? He said, these little monitos, man, they look like they're little things, like little guys like that big, and they're cute when they're little. He said, but when they get bigger, they look like the devil. And he said that, he goes, my tío, that's uncle in Spanish, you know, he goes, we were taking them to Mexico, and we were selling them. And he goes, and we'd get them in like little, like four packs, like you could get them in like an egg, it hatches, you know, and they put them under a heat lamp. This is what he told me. He said they look, when they're little, like little lizards, you know. But then they get bigger. He said they get about 3 or 4 feet tall, and they're voracious predators. And he said now they're running all over Mexico because, you know, people were taking them from the Puerto Rican island, and they were taking them to Mexico. So when the people in Mexico were seeing them and reporting something very similar that was seen in Puerto Rico, people were like, mentiras, you know, that's not true. That's a lie. That couldn't be. It's only in Puerto Rico. It's not in Mexico. So this guy claims that that's what they were doing.
What year? Do we know a rough year or decade?
Yeah, he said this was like in the 90s. You know, he said it was like the mid to late 90s, yeah. And he said that they don't know where they came from, but then the first reports that they got of them in Cuba, they started showing up in Cuba. You know, he said was in the mid to late 90s. And I think that there's something to that because like Puerto Rico and Cuba are right there next to each other. Now, we don't know a lot about what's going on in Cuba, or Venezuela or, a lot of these countries because they're closed off, they're communist or socialist. And so you don't really know what, but I do have a lot of friends that are of Cuban descent, and this guy, he lives in Chicago now. I tried to tell him, hey man, you got to come on the show, dude, and talk about this, but he's kind of worried because, they were doing something highly illegal, and he's like, well, I don't know if I can talk about that on the show, but that's what he told us. And it was just so weird. And I thought, dude, and he said he wasn't the only one. There were several of these people that were selling these things as pets. And these things started showing up on the border of Texas, back in the early 2000s. And I had a friend of mine who claims he was driving near Falfurrias. It's a small town. And he was driving through it. And he said, dude, I smacked one of them. And he literally ran one over. And I was like, are you being serious? There was a guy I used to bounce with down. His name was Carl. Oh, I probably should have said his name. But anyway, he worked with me and my friends. And he said, I was driving down there. And I ran this thing over, and he goes, I got out of my truck because I wanted to see what it was. And he was like, it was me, my fiance, and her son. And they got out and they looked at it, and he said that the back of it was still kind of popping up and down, like the nerves or something. And he said it was so weird. It had like spines. And he said that there was a weird looking head, and he said that it started to turn, so they ran back into their vehicle and got in and took off because it was a terrifying looking creature. Now, that's way down in South Texas, and that was in 2002, I believe. He told me that. And I remember that because we were at the Super Bowl party, and that was the year the Buccaneers won the Super Bowl. First time I was thrilled. That's my team. But
we've other side of the world, I know, but 1997, and it just come up as part of Wolflands. There's a ex-detective who's passed away now, Tony Dodd. He was a UFO researcher primarily, wrote a book called Alien Investigator. But he was researching in North Yorkshire Forest in 1997, animal mutilations. And I've got a letter from Tony Dodd that we're probably going to use in Wolflands. He's wrote to somebody who's contacted us, and he said that they'd shot a chupacabra in the forest in North Yorkshire. But I know we're tying into the same decade, but it's other side of the world. But I don't mean it's a strange thing to say, but it's not out of realms of possibilities, is it?
No.
So
I mean, exotic pets being what they are, black cats in England too.
Oh, that's something that we'll probably work on at some point, because we've got so many reports of panther-type cats or panther-sized cats that, once again, they're there. I've actually seen one with my own eyes, so I know they're there. And myself and Bob Brown saw one on what's called Bempton Lane. If we'd have been a few seconds quicker, we'd have ran it over. I'm not saying I would have ran it over.
How big was it?
Like a Labrador dog.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, as big as a Labrador dog, and we saw its back, we saw its tail just going into the road. I pulled straight into a farm entrance and stuck a torch on, but we couldn't see it. And I mean, Bob will vouch for that. He were with me, and there's no end of reports from these forests in and around North Yorkshire. But once again, you get these locational reports. There's a lane in between Bridlington and Bempton called Short Lane. Nondescript lane. Me and Les were actually on it on, I think it was Monday night, filming somebody as part of a documentary that we're doing. But there's nothing on it. There's just arable land at one side and pasture at other, with an hedgerow. But we've got reports in archives of years of black panthers being seen crossing that lane. Sure. It makes you wonder if it's some kind of thin area where, dare we say that,
thinning of the veil,
supernatural type things. Maybe it's just some kind of exotic science that we don't understand, where these things are running parallel. I really don't know, but it never ceases to surprise me that these areas keep throwing the same things up time and time again. I mean, do you get panther-type reports, or is it just...
Yeah, absolutely we do. But one of the reports I investigated, this one was in, I'm trying to remember the name of the town. It's a small little town.
I'm glad you let me speak there, Josh. That was very good of you.
I'm sorry, man.
Well, no,
I'm sorry. Well, you speak when you come on my show, so I mean,
I'm joking. It's good. By the way,
I'm sorry for talking so much. I just just excited about the
it's
topics
brilliant.
here.
That's what people want, and you've literally entertained me and I'm sure Les and everybody else that's been listening all the way through. But we've not quite done yet. I don't know whether Les has got any more questions. If he has, we'll go with it. If not, I just want to touch on the military reports. Do you get a lot of reports of cryptids near military installations?
Yeah, absolutely. And another weird thing is near power plants and water treatment plants. I don't know the energy. I don't know. It's so weird. I mean, the black cat thing. I investigated a report of that, and this guy sent me a picture. And when I blew the picture up, like when we looked at it closely, we saw the spots, and I said that's a jaguar. Yeah. It was in Deep South Texas. It was in Alice, Texas. I was trying to remember the name of it. And it was right south of Alice, which there's nothing there. And he said, I got a report. I got something, a black cat on my property. I took a picture of it. And he really was excited. I didn't want to burst his bubble, but it is interesting that it was a jaguar. Jaguars have melanin that they have a black. It's you can see the spots though if you really look. But they look. But you can see the circular spots. I was thinking it could be something, and in the supernatural aspect of it, very possible too. But I was thinking of more along the lines of like maybe exotic pet dealers, and maybe they back in the 70s. Yeah, there were people that were buying them in England, and I think that maybe that's a resident population now that has taken residence there, and they could be jaguars. Maybe you saw a smaller one. Now, animals will also grow to a certain size depending on their environment. And now in England, maybe they don't have as much room. So you get a smaller version of these things over the decades. They just didn't get as big because a full-grown jaguar in its own element will kill a caiman crocodile. Yeah. I've seen them do it on video. I'm sure everybody's witnessed these things. I posted one on my Facebook of it just jumping into the water, swimming out to this little island, jumping up there and grabbing this croc and then taking off with it. And you're going like, wow. So, jaguar is the third largest cat, the tiger being the largest, then the lion, then the jaguar. They're very popular as pets. I knew a guy who had a mountain lion out in Alpine, Texas. And he had a little makeshift zoo out there. And he tried to get me to go in and pet it and play with it. I'm like, I'm good, dude. I'm good. No, it's cool. I'm good, I just, it's a wild animal and this isn't the zoo. I'm not going to, but I'm thinking that could be something, because we have python problems now down in the swamps of Florida. Pythons are killing alligators and alligators are killing pythons, and they found them wrapped together, killing each other. I mean, just Google, it's crazy. Yeah. But they're not from here. Those reticulated pythons come from another place. Yeah. And exotic pet dealers brought them. So
we'll just jump to Les before we have to wind this up. Les,
we've got 10 minutes left on the show because we was 10 minutes late starting, guys. Okay. Let's have a look. I've got probably lots of questions in here. We won't have time to get through them, and I apologise now in advance to everybody who's put a question in for Josh and Paul. It doesn't look as if we're going to get through them, but I've got one from Warren Hardcastle, and Warren is asking, could Josh give an overview on the Hernandez Ranch? I don't know if I pronounced that correctly.
Hernandez Ranch, yes.
Hernandez, yes.
Let me explain something about that. Oh, go ahead, Les.
Yeah, 10 minutes, Josh, we've got left of the show. I'll just remind you.
Okay. I'll give you a little bit of something about that. I do have listeners in the UK too, and so for them and for the ones here in the States, when I did this, when me and my guys, because I can't take all the credit for it because it was a team effort, we actually did interview several of these people. We worked with them. There was a lot of metaphysical things that went on that were involved in that story, but I was not able to tell that on that person's show. You're looking at like 175,000. That's months ago when I looked. There was, views on that show, on that series of shows. You had probably 200,000 views now. And when we did the updates, people on my show, people were like, well, why did it all of a sudden become more metaphysical? I was like, it was always metaphysical. We just weren't allowed to talk about it on that show because there's a skewed narrative there. You have to keep it strictly physical. So you have to, trim it down to, and I lament that because I need to write it out and I need to like have it so people can, because these people went through all this stuff and all you're getting is the reports of their werewolf type creatures, and that's it. There were lights, lots of balls of lights, orbs, things floating through the house, and all kinds of weird stuff happening. There was telepathic communication going on. It was not just Dogman standing there and that's it. But that's all you could talk about, There was a lot of, and of course that story took on a life of its own. What happened was there was an individual that reached out to the main person that I had, his uncle. I got in touch with his uncle. Well, that person eventually passed away, and he died not talking to me because of this other individual's friend that went out there and started messaging, trying to get in. And how they found them, I have no clue. But it really aggravated me because there was a good 2-year gap there where I wasn't able to communicate with them. We weren't working at the same sites anymore because they worked on the construction end and we did the security. And I worked with them for about 2 years before I even knew that anything had gone on. I mean, you could be standing in line at the grocery store and you don't know this person may have had a Bigfoot encounter. Mm-hmm. So I make it a point now to just talk about this stuff all the time, everywhere I go. I'm just like, who cares? I mean, what are you going to do? Beat me up? I mean, if So I started talking to this guy one day because I was listening to a report from somebody. And he asked me what that was. And when we started talking, he was like, holy crap, I've had this stuff going on. My tios, my uncles, he goes, they've had this stuff going on, maybe you guys could come investigate. Well, at that time, I had a strict policy of, I don't want nothing to do with this. I'm not going out there to investigate. I eventually did a couple times, but I was like, I'm not going out there to investigate this. That's not going to happen. I will take your stories. And so he got me in touch with his uncles. He got me in touch with his brother and his other uncle. They worked there with us. And they began to tell us these stories about all these things that went on. Well, I go to this show that I was doing, and I wish I would have had another outlet at the time because I would have been able to tell the whole story, but you're not. You're confined to, don't talk about the woo, because that's what the derogatory term that closed-minded people call, the metaphysical aspect of it. And it is a swipe at people who believe it, and unfortunately, you're at that show, you're only relegated to telling the physical, and so when you do that, you leave out a lot. But the next update is going to come probably in late November. I got a lot on my plate, a lot scheduled to come out in November. So anybody that keeps up with the show, Lauren Coleman, he's going to come on the show in late November and talk. And I got the Hernandez Ranch update supposed to come out in, I think, maybe middle of November, around Thanksgiving. A lot of stuff. Hopefully, Paul, me and you will have our second set together where you can talk because you'll be my guest, and so I hope that people will stay tuned and our listenership will grow because Paul, I think you do a great job. I am just thrilled that we were able to actually get in there and record. Also, it was special to me because a former co-host, was always lamenting that we didn't, and he wanted to release that episode, and then I said no because it's not complete, The man needs to come back, and we need to do, to do it justice. We can't just release a halfway done thing,
Well,
so we shelved that, that first recording or whatever. I was thinking about maybe one day it becoming worth something, and we could auction it off like we did Bartonelli's book. No, I'm just joking about that. But seriously, it was something that I'd wanted to do. It was a goal that I'd set for myself, one of my goals, to get you back on, and I think that, we should work together a lot more in the future. And in exchange of information too, I work closely with the NADP here, North American Dogman Project. And one section of the country was actually shut off to me. But they put in a new director now, and I'm good friends with him. He's written 23 books. His name is D.A. Roberts. He's a really great guy. And I am glad that information can flow now back and forth. I probably field 200-300 reports a week at this point. I get, do I read every single one of them. I don't have time, even with a team of people, because there's this massive flow of information now that comes back and forth between me and people like you.
Yeah.
But as many as I can get to, I try to get to, and I try to go after the credible reports and the reports that are, that thing has a life of its own, I'm telling you. So we try to get the reports that are, you know, as credible, you know, and or that they're just make for good conversation.
Yeah.
You know, to help us lead toward the truth, you know, and what we're trying to ascertain what's going on. You know what I mean? And I really think that the Hernandez Ranch is an example of like just me beginning my career on the wrong foot here, because I should have been, you know, more cognizant of like, hey, this is telling a half story instead of the whole story.
But we're gonna get the full story in the next few months, Josh, aren't we? You know, so I think a lot of people will be looking forward to that. Well, I don't know whether Les has got anything else to say, but on behalf of myself and Les, Truth Proof Digital Creations, and Deborah, who's done moderating, thank you. Really enjoyed it, Josh, and you've just made it so easy for me that it's just been wonderful. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I appreciate you having me on, Paul.
No, you're more than welcome. And I don't know whether we can briefly get it in for anyone in UK who wanted to contact you. Is there an email address?
Yes, yeah, Josh Turner at prtpodcast.com, Josh Turner at prtpodcast.com. And if you send me your information and you heard me on Paul's show, of course, Paul, you're be privy to anything that I have. I'll share my information with you. I'm not going to take your stories or anything like that, and you get credited, because I believe that we're all in this together.
Thank you. And don't forget, like and subscribe, which is something I always get told to say and never do. Thank you very much.
Yeah, like and subscribe. I never do it either. I end up every show, and my nephew's like, you know, telling people like and subscribe, and I'm always forgetting. We're not even like doing ourselves justice here. Paul is for my fans out there, Paul is a great guy. I think he's one of the best in England, hands down, the man. You need the dog man guy in England. So that's my opinion.
Okay, yeah, right. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Josh. And we know you don't come on many shows, podcasts, or anything like that, Josh. So it's been a great privilege to have you on tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and I've got to say to our viewers, thank you very much for coming on to the live stream tonight, and for staying with us under technical conditions that we had at the beginning. I'm fortunate, and we really apologise for that, but we did go on 10 minutes. Yeah, we have gone on 10 minutes longer. Gremlins for sure, Josh. Yeah, always a case, doesn't it? So I've got to say, from Les Digital Creations, Truth Proof, Paul Sinclair, and for Josh Turner, we've got to say good night.